They said they were going to do it, and they did it. Nothing ever happens. Bro's in complete despair.
It is a day of breaking news, and in another moment of breaking news just in, France's Prime Minister Michel Barnier has been ousted in a historic no-confidence vote this morning. He only got the job...
I don't care about this. Channel 4 News is the way to go when it comes to French stuff. Wait, not Channel 4 News, sorry. French 24? France 24? What's the name of the French news channel that translates to English and is actually really... France 24. Yeah, they do really good coverage.
Well, it was after a disastrous snap election in July that Macron had appointed Michel Barnier to instill a sense of calm, but behind...
Okay, I'll just remind everyone what happened because I don't want these newscasters to do it because they're, I don't know, liberals or something. Science hasn't figured it out yet. So basically, Macron, a little while ago, he's the president of France, and he has a party, a coalition of parties that kind of vote in a block with him. It's coalition government. It's a parliament. They had EU elections, that is to say, elections to see who represents France in the European Union, and Macron's party got trounced by the National Front, by Le Pen, the fascists. Macron, in a brilliant high IQ maneuver, then called for a snap election, essentially resetting the parliamentary government, a largely unprecedented move, which he decided to do in a way of like shoring up support for his party, which was idiotic because support for his party was at an all-time low. It looked like after the first round of voting, Le Pen's party, the National Front, was going to win, taking not a majority, but like a large enough portion of the National Assembly in order to effectively control the parliament. But thanks to a hastily formed leftist coalition, they really quickly banded together and worked with some of the members of Macron's party who really didn't want Le Pen to win. Like, basically, the left stepped up and said, listen, liberals, I know we don't get along, I know we don't agree on everything, but we can agree we need the fascists out, right? And in order for us to facilitate this, we need to work together and some of us need to drop out. So votes are not split between us in the final round. So that way, one of us wins with 60 rather than both of us getting 30 and Le Pen getting 40 in all these districts. And thanks to their brilliant maneuver, the left saved Parliament after the snap election. Le Pen's party went from getting something like 240 votes estimated after the first round of voting to getting only like 130. They trounced her. The left and liberals worked together and did phenomenal work. Now, keep in mind, many liberals within Macron's coalition worked with the leftist coalition, but Macron himself did not. Those were lower level members of Macron's coalition who did this. Macron was obstinate throughout. He did not work with the leftists. And after the parliamentary elections were settled, we now have a majority government combined of the left and liberals. Macron and his coalition now controlled less of the General Assembly than the left coalition. So in terms of like overall proportionment, you have the left and then in a far second place, the fascists, and then right below the fascists, you have the centrists. You have Macron's party. Macron, because he still controls the presidency, though not for long, hated the idea of working with leftists. So rather than kowtowing to the left and working with them on future policy, he instead spited them by putting forward a prime minister who was conservative. Oh, sorry, Ensemble is still ahead of the National Rally. Okay, sorry. It's the leftists, and then in distant second, the centrists, and then right behind them, the fascists. Macron spited the left because he didn't want to work with them or play second fiddle to them, even though the leftists controlled by far the most in the General Assembly, and he appointed a prime minister who was conservative and wanted to go forward with Macron's extremely unpopular social austerity bill. Because neither the fascists nor the leftists supported the social austerity bill, which would raise the age of retirement, so on and so forth, cut spending, the prime minister, the unpopular prime minister Barnier, he put forward the bill in a uncontestable manner. That is to say, he put it forward in a way where it goes through with nobody needing to vote in it. The only way to challenge it is a vote of no confidence, which, if it succeeds, upends the government. Guess what just happened? Macron is literally destroying France. Macron ballooned the deficit with his tax cuts for the wealthy. And then, because of the deficit he created, he insisted on cutting social spending and raising the age of retirement, which French people despise the idea of. He loses in the EU elections, so he does an ill-fated snap election where he loses out both to the fascists and the left, refuses to work with the left, and now we have this. Macron is more responsible for France's decline than any fascist, and when France does fall to the fascists, if they do, it will be his fault. Absolutely sickening. Let's get France 24 up here. It really is the same story everywhere, huh? Yeah, but this is a particularly egregious example of it, because in most countries where this plays out, the left had no real power. In France, the left did. The left's hasty coalition, their brilliant maneuver during the snap election, that was the chance, that was the good timeline to realize the popularity and power of left populism and worked with it. But Macron won't allow it. In many other countries, such as here in America, the left never had any real power. It was just the liberals and the fascists. But now, absolutely sickening. And by the way, like, pardon me for my overstatement, my comedic overstatement, if you will, but I think that if you support Macron in these maneuvers, you are morally equivalent to Vichy, like the Vichy government in France. I think you're effectively a collaborator. Like, unwittingly or no, you can delude yourself into thinking this is the only way. You are literally like paving the stones for fascist governance. Like, you might deny this, you might reject it, but you are choosing to prioritize the growth of fascism in your country over kowtowing in any way to left populism. You look at a path, you have socialism and barbarism, and you are choosing barbarism. And it's not like this was just a one-off decision. This is a path you've been walking down for at least 8 years now. Like, you have had every opportunity to turn around. It's just sickening. Yeah, and Macron's party is dead. Ensemble is dead. Their coalition is dead. They're not gaining support. Like, you are choosing to stay on a sinking ship.
Brexit Parliament. She had a short stint as French Prime Minister. The EU's former Brexit negotiator on the cusp of watching his minority government fall to the hands of Parliament, a first in this country since 1962. It was always going to be an uphill battle to pass a budget while so far outnumbered by an opposition that goes from the far right to the far left. We'll ask.
Actually, absolutely.
Maybe we'll go over this debate, but first I want to get really angry at this specific segment. Barnier government on chopping block, very surprising alliance between left-wing coalition or far right. That's not an alliance between the left wing and the right wing. Your dipshit put the bill forward in a way that could only be contested via a vote of no confidence. You knew they didn't support the bill. That's not an alliance. Your bill just sucks. The alliance between the far left and far right here includes the French people. Like, what is the approval over the raising of the retirement age in France? Like, what is the approval? They literally rioted over. Well, it's the French. So the French riot over like everything anyway. I don't know if that really means anything. Yeah, look at this. So not only did people riot over it, a majority of people supported the country being shut down through the protests. Do you have any idea how unpopular a bill has to be for 59% of the electorate to say they back the call to bring the country to a standstill? This isn't even just 59% oppose the bill. This is 59% of the people believe in shutting it down. 2 in 3 people support the protest movement in general. That's just the protest movement. This isn't even support of the bill. How many people actively support the bill? Probably less than 20%. So this framing, this like very surprising alliance between the left-wing coalition far right, nobody likes this bill. It's only neolibs and neocons and austerity hawks. Those are the only people who like this bill. Pushing it through as anti-democratic? Yes!
Well, France's far-right leader Marine Le Pen, who's Jordan Bardela's mentor, has not been afraid to play hardball with the Prime Minister during the divisive budget negotiations. But she is also currently tied up in a high-profile embezzlement trial that could keep her from participating in France's next presidential election.
Hopefully.
Elitsa Gadeva and Morgan Eyre take a closer look now at what Le Pen is hoping to get out of this week's political chaos.
For months, the electorate of the right-wing National Rally Party has been rooting for the fall of Michel Barnier's government. For some voters, Le Pen's move to back a no-confidence vote was necessary.
Something had to be done. She did it, and that's great. For me, it's a good thing.
She didn't start a mess. She did like everyone. She expressed her opinion and her ideas.
But others are less convinced.
In my opinion, we've already gained a lot. Maybe we should have stopped there.
Marine Le Pen says she was acting against a dangerous, unjust and punitive budget when she refused to back...
It is worth noting, by the way, that Le Pen's national rally is completely full of shit here. Their own budget guy has proposed essentially like the same austerity. Their plan to address France's ballooning deficit is like pro-business austerity as well. They're fascists. They don't actually believe in a welfare state. They're just using cynicism and populist rhetoric as an excuse to oust the liberals. The left populists, the left coalition actually does have a plan to expand the welfare state and cut down on the budget, but nobody takes it seriously because when you mention stuff like Keynesian economics in the face of neoliberals, they laugh at you, even though all the data supports Keynesian economics and none of it supports the trickle down economics they support. Like you could when you like the radical left idea of what if we did the thing that worked in every Western government from the 1930s onward.
The Prime Minister's social security budget over the weekend. But poll watchers say that's only the tip of the iceberg.
Guys, I have an insane idea for raising money in a way that doesn't hurt poor people. What if we taxed rich people? And then neoliberals like beat you to death with a baguette, I guess in this case.
Over the weekend, the National Rally tried to negotiate a pension increase in line with inflation. Experts see the move as an electoral tactic. Le Pen's goal, to attract the pensioners who have historically shunned the far right.
She wants to show that even though other political parties didn't fight against the new pension reform until the end, she did. She's going ahead with a no-confidence vote just to protect the retirees, so her message is fundamentally pointed towards her electorate.
Legal troubles are also weighing over Marine Le Pen. For opponents, her trial for allegedly embezzling EU Parliament funds pushed her to spark the political crisis. The case could see her banned from running for public office. If Barnier's government...
Hi. So yeah, I do think that's partially having a distraction from what's happening with the affair with the parliamentary assistance and the embezzlement of funds. I also think that she's trying to push the agenda of the national rally about, protecting the senior citizens, but it's quite a risky strategy. That
genius move on the ensemble's part to give up that point to the fascists, by the way. The fascist agenda of protecting the retirement benefits of senior citizens. Oh, that's what a genius move on their part. Masterful gambit, sir.
Marine Le Pen has pursued, because as we've seen in summer, she actually managed to stay away from this kind of coalition formation chaos that happened. And she eventually agreed on the Barnier government. She gave her green light. But what we're seeing now is that, it might actually it might actually backfire on her, because
remember when I said Macron spited the left by putting forward Barnier, the conservative? Le Pen agreed to that. Like, that's how cooked Macron is. That's how fascist adjacent Macron is. That he put in place a prime minister that Le Pen liked, but the left coalition didn't, even though the left coalition worked tirelessly to save Macron's party from complete political irrelevancy by working with them during the snap election. That's how hateful and sickeningly collaborationist Macron is. Vichy government shit, seriously. It would be like if the Vichy government formed before World War II started, and they were like preemptively going like, hey, it'd be great if the Maginot Line was completely circumvented and we got blitzkrieged. And then we had to answer to Germany. Wouldn't that be great? Wouldn't that be great? And everyone's like, okay.
Eventually, if Rassemblement National will support the vote of no confidence initiated by the left-wing alliance, Rassemblement National will also be kind of held accountable for the future political instability and political deadlock that France is going to experience in that case, because essentially they will help to topple the government, and there'll be the need for the new prime minister. And we know that it's going to be very difficult for Emmanuel Macron to name a prime minister who is going to resonate with left-wing and right-wing blocs within...
You don't need to. You don't need to. You just need to put forward a prime minister who appeals to both the left wing and the center. You don't need to appeal to the right wing. The left won. The left plus the center makes up like a significant majority within the fucking National Assembly. You don't need to appeal to the right. You are choosing to.
The National Assembly, and the future prime minister, like the current one, will still have a weak electoral legitimacy. So it's going to be very difficult for a new prime minister to find a compromise. And senior citizens, as much as they care about the retirement, and their pensions, what Marine Le Pen is trying to advocate, they also are very conservative in nature. So they very much, try to protect the status quo and prevent further political instability. So her decision to support the vote of no confidence may actually backfire on her, because the kind of senior citizens, they fear this fear of the unknown is actually what kept them away from supporting Marine Le Pen previously. So they like this political stability, and her support in the no confidence vote will actually trigger further political deadlock and lead to political instability. So it might not actually, play out in her favor.
And what's so interesting here is you really have this unlikely alliance between the far right and the left, who are so...
That's not an alliance. That's not what an alliance means.
...against this budget. I mean, I understand the politics of why they're against this budget, but I mean, deep down, there is an economic crisis. And I find it so surprising that some politicians don't seem to want to admit that the deficit is as bad as it is, or perhaps this is a way to get France out of its bad space. I mean, what do you think is keeping them from recognizing the economic difficulties of the country?
Well, I think the decision of Emmanuel Macron also to stay in power and not to resign is important, because you see, if his government and the coalition of parties that are within his government are going to recognize that, that will mean that, there'll be more calls for Macron to resign, and he already said that he's not going to do that. So the recognition of these difficulties that, France's economy is facing will be a blow to Emmanuel Macron, and eventually, there will be more calls for his resignation. So they don't want to do that, and they don't want to recognize that. And of course, you're absolutely right that it is a very surprising alliance between the left-wing coalition and the National Rally. But I think, in this case, National Rally might be quite...
You know what Macron's approval rating is right now, by the way? It's like 23%. You know that's lower than Trump or Biden's ever was by a wide margin? That's how unpopular he is. This spiteful piece of shit is dragging the entire French government down with him. And it's only gone down further since then. George W. Bush-ass numbers? No. Nope.
Damaged, if they will electorally damaged in the future if they support the vote of no confidence.
So for you, is it a done deal or not a done deal that Michel Barnier will get voted out tonight?
Well, we know how that one went.
Well, we're joined now by a French MP for the party of the president, Eleanor Carrois. Thanks so much for coming in and giving us your time. I guess we should start with...
Party of the president. She's a filthy neoliberal.
This motion of no confidence. Do you feel it's going to go through this evening?
Well, I don't have a crystal ball, but based on what the parties that depose these motions are saying, yeah, mathematically it seems like it's going to go through.
And then what happens? I mean, then Michel Barnier, he's gone as prime minister. It took quite a while to find him to be the prime minister. The assembly, a very divided one.
Yeah, and for me, the most important issue is not that much that the government will be turned down, because that's something that could have happened anyways when you have such a divided assembly, but is that we are not going to have a budget voted by the end of the year. In the best scenario, we'll have the budget from last year apply, which means mechanically that about 400,000 French people will pay taxes when they didn't before, and another 17 million will have their taxes increased. And these are only two examples.
Have you considered putting forward a yearly budget proposal that isn't so unpopular that you have to force it through with no parliamentary approval, thus triggering the collapse of the government? I'm not a master of government, so I'm just spitballing here. But is it possible that you could avoid incredible, unprecedented gridlock by not deliberately doing things that are so unpopular you have to avoid the parliamentary system? Is that too much work?
examples of what would happen if we don't have a proper budget. So that's what worries me the most at this stage.
Definitely, and the financial turmoil we've seen already even impact on the wider market and the euro. But this budget, it was pushed through by force, clear opposition from the parliament. They were elected by the people. You know, Michel Barnier doesn't come from either side of neither the biggest group, which is the alliance of left-wing parties, or the biggest party, the far right.
Yeah, and his legitimacy was based on his capacity to build a compromise. And what he did in this budget, and I'm not going to defend
And
that.
what he did in this budget was put forward the same budget Macron wanted with some minor compromises. He was put forward to appease the right. They were spitting at the left with Barnier's appointment.
Budget, because there are several things in that budget that I totally disagree with. But what he did, and you have to give him that, is that he took proposals, the most important proposals from the different groups, and he tried to make a compromise budget, bearing into account that we're in a very constrained environment and we need to reduce our debt. So it wasn't perfect at all, but it was something, and it was negotiated and discussed with several groups. So the fact that they turned around so quickly and so unexpectedly.
Dude, I love this. I look up what budget compromises took place. The last one, French premier offers final hour budget concession to Le Pen, even though Le Pen controls fewer members of the parliament than the left assembly. In the final hour, they're like, the one strategy I haven't tried before, my final effort, I'll appeal to the right. Even though they literally represent less people than the left coalition. It's incredible. Who could have guessed that this would happen with Barnier, a conservative who works with the far right? Wow, what a shocker.
I think also shows that this was a very political move in the sense, you know, and not in the good sense, and that it is actually putting France into a very difficult position for politician reasons.
Indeed, and as you're saying, time tight on getting a budget in place. There had been pressure on France, even from outside, to do so.
Like literally, what compromises were made to the left? Were there any? I would love to know. It's hard to find info on it because if you look up anything about the French government's budget vote right now, it's just about how the government's currently collapsing.
But without a prime minister, we're not going to have the next budget. So the real first question, I imagine, is who can take over as prime minister? Does it need to go back to the biggest parts of parliament?
Well, that's funny because everyone is asking that very question. And I think that's the question we asked ourselves 6 months ago. And it isn't the question we should be asking ourselves now. We should be asking ourselves the question of what project are we going to be able to build? What coalition, so to speak, before thinking about a name, with an assembly that is so divided. We have 11 groups. We've never had that many. They're not talking to each other. They have different views. Even the blocks, they talk about 3 blocks. That's nonsense. Within those blocks, there's so many differences. So you have to find a way. And finding a way, in my opinion...
Genuinely, if anyone can find an article on any compromises that Barnier made to the left coalition with regards to the construction of this budget, I would like to find. I can't believe there would be none. Can somebody find me any?
Means discussing, you know, the priorities of every single representative, because we've all been elected legitimately, and then trying to find something that works, and then you'll find the providential men or women.
Indeed, because other countries, I mean, it's true that like the Netherlands often has a myriad of parties. It's quite a new thing for France, I guess, to have so many parties in parliament. But we can't hold new elections here in France. And as you say, we're all legitimately elected. So technically, how is it going to move forward if this vote of no confidence goes through, if we don't have a government by the end of the week? Where do you think the push is going to come to bring all these dividing sides together for France?
The way she speaks shows how much liberals hate democracy. Oh, yeah, for sure. Neoliberals just think of themselves as like technocratic administrators of a state whose job it is to return reliable profits to industry and subsistence needs to the people. And when the people start to get uppity, they get frustrated because they genuinely don't understand the concept of people like disagreeing or wanting more.
It's not for optimism, but I can't help myself to see some light at the end of the tunnel. We're learning the hard way to do what other countries, as you rightly say, do all the time. We're inventing parliamentarism the French way. And the truth of the matter is we've never done this because we've always had a clear majority and a clear opposition, a very binary system as you'd have in the UK or in the US. But the truth is we don't have that, and we can't have other elections. And in any event, you'd have elections, you'd pretty have this, I think you'd have the same results. So it is a matter of sitting together and making compromises. And obviously everyone is blaming the other party, but you have to point out clearly that a party like the Socialist Party...
Well, no, everyone is blaming you, actually. Oh, is she about to specifically attack the socialists, even though they've been, like, proposing their own budgetary plan and being completely shafted and ignored?
That has been in government, that is, it's part of a bloc that is reasonable, I would say. It's not in the extreme populist party, is not being helpful and is not cooperating, because if they were...
Why would... First, just incredible. Like, literally, like, astonishing.
We wouldn't be depending upon the National Rally, and we wouldn't be in the situation...
We have no choice but to depend on Le Pen's National Rally. The left won't cooperate. I mean, I know they worked to save us during the snap election, cooperated with the Ensemble in order to save the country from falling to the far right, and then we appointed a prime minister who was ideologically opposed to them and shut down their, like, we didn't even respect their, like, prime minister proposition, even though they have the most seats in the National Assembly and therefore should be the ones to put forward the prime minister, which we completely ignored and shut down. Like, why are they being unreasonable? I know they have their own budgetary plan that we're completely ignoring and not compromising in favor of, but, like, this is why we have no choice to work with Le Pen, the fascists, who are also voting against us in the vote of no confidence. They're collaborationists. They're collaborationists, man. All I can find are examples of Barnier compromising with the right. Does anyone watching this right now think that I am being hyperbolic when I say that Macron and his stooges in the Ensemble are collaborationists? Like, whether they know what they're doing or not, the degree of kowtowing, the degree of, like, deliberate, malicious power ceding to the right with nothing given to the left, and then blaming the left for them going to the right, insane. They would see queer French people in camps. They would see pensioners starving on the street before they ceded any power to a left populist.
Situation we're in right now.
A lot of people are also blaming not just the party of the president to which you belong, but the president himself, who called these snap elections. And, we're hearing calls over his position. Should that be called into the question, that it's his decision that got us to where we are today?
Well, what that shows is that, in fact, the reason we're here today is not because the parties are so unhappy with the budget, which is a compromise budget again, but it is because you have two important figures in France's political scene, which are Marine Le Pen and Jean-Luc Mélenchon. They've both been candidates to the presidential election several times.
It's journalistic malpractice that the journalist here isn't making the same points as you. Yeah, it is crazy. This is France 24 English. I mean, this is pretty much like the kind of the repped, like, news channel. They're ostensibly not meant to be, like, partisan or whatever. And Macron is insanely unpopular. And none of this is coming up. They're just letting this bitch go off on how we have no choice but to work with the National Rally. What you're going to expect? You expect us to concede power to the people who won and have the power? The people who won the public mandate? Who cares what the public wants?
And they both think that today, pushing it a bit further, creating a bit of chaos, they're going to be next to each other in a couple of months. And the reason why...
No, the socialists don't want to be next to the National Rally. That's why they worked during the snap election to keep the National Rally out of power. You want to be next to them. You're the one who appointed the conservative prime minister. You're the one who keeps compromising to them. You're the one who's working with them. You want to be next to them. You want a parliament that is 51% liberal and 49% fascist. You are the ones who want to stand next to them.
Why it's so important to them, for Marine Le Pen, is because she have a judicial, verdict coming up that might render her ineligible, which to her would be a disaster. I mean, she's been waiting for this all her life. And for Jean-Luc Mélenchon, he's not getting younger, and he's also hoping to be facing Marine Le Pen. So they're both playing it very personally and not looking into the interest.
Mélenchon doesn't want to... What is this comparison? He doesn't want to face Le Pen. He wants to be the president, which is normal when you lead a political party in a country. What is this? He wants to face Le Pen? Why does he want to face Le Pen? I think he wants to beat Macron.
Just of France, and they're both hoping that Emmanuel Macron will eventually leave. But I think that would be a disaster, obviously, for a country.
Okay.
It'd be disastrous if our, like, 20% approval rating president, who no one likes and keeps losing elections, left.
And we'll have to tell where that compromise will come from. Eleanor Carrois, thanks so much for coming in.
Fuck you, piece of shit. Collaborationist, Nazi, boot-licking motherfucker.
The budget and deciding on next year's budget. And this is absolutely crucial. So if that had happened at another time, we could have had, resigning.
It was a foregone conclusion. Michel Barnier, the French Prime Minister, knew it. It would be very difficult for him to stay in office. And in his final words just before the vote, it was very much a goodbye speech, stressing what he had achieved. He has now lost 330.
Literally nothing. You've been Prime Minister for like 5 days and you've got nothing done. You were appointed as a spite move against the left and you did nothing.
1 votes against him. That's more than the required majority. And I can tell you that the MPs who have left the National Assembly and who are now walking around, we've been able to speak to some of them. One national rally, an MP from the Alpes-Maritimes in the south of France, from the French far-right party, of course. Well, I asked her, are you happy? Are you relieved? She says, neither. We knew this was going to happen. We knew we'd win the vote. Michel Barnier had to go. His budget was just unacceptable, unjust, unfair for the French people. So, of course, as you can imagine, sweet victory, smiled on the faces of the left-wing bloc and the far right, who both voted to oust Michel Barnier. And on the other hand, we just saw Bruno Retailleau, the Interior Minister, very much silent. He didn't say a word as he left, very disappointed by the situation. Michel Barnier, the French Prime Minister, is gone after only 3 months in office, and the government in France has collapsed.
It's a remarkable situation, Clovis. You're right at the centre of things there at the National Assembly, the Assemblée Nationale, just on the banks of the River Seine. Do you get any sense where you are right now about what might happen next, about who, for instance, could possibly move into the frame to replace Michel Barnier?
Indeed, and President Emmanuel Macron has now returned from Saudi Arabia. He's at the Élysée Palace, just the other side of the Seine, and he will now see Michel Barnier, who will hand over his letter of resignation. That's the tradition. And of course now the situation. There's no power vacuum, of course. The government stays in place as a caretaker, as an interim government, if you will, until the French president finds a suitable candidate and names a new prime minister. Difficulty here, and it is a very big...
Well, I look forward to the next appointment from Macron, you know, or the next, like, suggested candidate. Maybe someone from the National Rally, you know? Why not? Right? I mean, what's the difference, apparently?
It's a mood of extreme apprehension, I would say, here in Brussels. As Rob was just saying, it's the uncertainty, it's the political paralysis that is the most concerning, especially when it's coming at the same time as political paralysis in Germany, with everyone waiting for the outcome of the election there in February. It's a dangerous moment to have both France and Germany adrift here. Certainly at the European Commission, they're going to be worried about the departure of Michel Barnier. They liked him a lot. He's a former European Commissioner himself. He, of course, was also the Brexit negotiator for the EU. But it should bear saying that, in a way, it's EU rules that kind of triggered this crisis, because France was put under an excessive deficit procedure earlier this year. The budget somehow had to address the concerns that the EU was raising about France's spending. And even in the...
It wasn't the EU rules. The pressure for them to bring their spending in line probably added to it a little bit, but fundamentally this is about Macron and the ensemble kowtowing to the right. Like, even without the EU rules, all of this still would have happened.
Weeks leading up to this crisis, and even in the days leading up to this crisis, we saw Barnier making some concessions to the National Rally, which might have fallen afoul of EU deficit rules. So already he was edging toward a situation where that excessive deficit procedure was not going to be cleared by the end of the year. And so obviously this is a very bad sign for France being able to adhere to those rules. And there's a reason why the EU held off on putting France under this excessive deficit procedure for years, even though it should have been under the normal rules that would apply to any other country. And that is because France is so central to the European Union, as Rob was just saying. There's an expression here in Brussels. I
don't care about this guy.
Government for a while, as was the case in the spring, and we could have lived with it. But now we actually absolutely need to have a budget voted at some point early next year, maybe, if we don't have a government for a few months. But we do need.
Nice to see you too.
Podcast Popol off.
Tell me who's involved.
Years to go. So, is it too soon to ask if this perhaps marks the start of Macron's twilight? Today in the France.
The start? Oh, I'm sorry. I thought like a decade of dwindling popularity was enough to. Okay, the start.
For debate, we're looking at the fall of France's government with a socialist member of the French Senate, Hélène Conway-Mouret. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Thanks as well to Damien Lecomte, political science researcher at Paris Panthéon Sorbonne University.
Thank you.
We welcome back Richard Verly, France correspondent and columnist for Swiss publication Blick. How are you?
Good evening, François. I'm fine.
Good. And journalist Léa Chamboncel, the host of the French politics podcast Popol, author of More Women in Politics. Good to see you.
Nice to see you too. Thank you.
Your reactions on the hashtag F24debate. It took nearly 2 months for Emmanuel Macron to name a prime minister. It will have taken another 2 months for Michel Barnier to fall at the outset of voting on next year's budget. The motion of no confidence expected very shortly. Oliver Farry has more.
Jumping into the unknown. That is how multiple French papers have put it. With 2 no-confidence votes looming over Prime Minister Michel Barnier, he and his ministers could very well no longer be in power come Wednesday. For that to happen, either one of the 2 motions, be it the one called by the...
When was this recorded? So this was recorded, obviously, before the no confidence vote, just sometime in the recent past.
Right, or the one by the far left, would need to pass Parliament, and by a majority vote. Put forth on Monday after Barnier forced through his social security...
France is also experiencing an increase in the poverty rate. Yeah, austerity. Like, it's literally just austerity. It's because of Macron.
Law. Such no confidence motions can only be voted on by law 48 hours after they've been called. But already the necessary votes on the far right and on the left are said to be there, upping the likelihood that Barnier will be ousted.
We have always said that this is not the left's motion. The votes of no confidence tabled are motions of no confidence in the government.
Confronted with this umpteenth denial of democracy, we will censor this government. And Michel Barnier will go down in history as the Prime Minister with the shortest mandate in the Fifth Republic.
If Barnier's government does fall, what then would happen on the political front in France? Well, it remains the great unknown, as the newspapers called it. Emmanuel 25.
Option. Hélène Conway-Mouret, markets today pretty stable. Is there a crisis? Is this a big crisis? How big a crisis?
This is the market guy from before. The last time we saw a debate, this guy was also like, all right, that's very interesting. However, how do you think the markets are doing? This guy's got a very well-developed bit.
Well, there is a political crisis, obviously. As you rightly said, it's kind of unknown. We're trying to deal. We have a lot of constitutional lawyers telling us, the various options as to what we can do. It's just a time of the year which is very problematic, because we're in the middle of debating the budget and deciding on next year's budget. And this is absolutely crucial. So if that had happened at another time, we could have had, resigning government for a while, as was the case in the spring, and we could have lived with it. But now we actually absolutely need to have a budget voted at some point. Early next year, maybe, if we don't have a government for a few months, but we do need it.
Would you have voted the motion of no confidence if you'd been
Personally, I would not. I would not, because I feel that it's just, the situation is just so chaotic at the moment that by having a government being replaced by who, to do what, with a National Assembly which is not going to be changed for another 6 months, at least, with 3 blocs that have proved to be totally unable to speak to each other or have some kind of agreement, so that instead of having 3 blocs and one of them blocking, if they want, which is the case today, having two of them making a majority, but they were unable to do it because it's not in the French tradition to have these kind of coalition governments or these kind of compromises. We work more in the Senate that way, and where we find compromises, and we do have unanimous vote in a lot of text simply because we have given each party or each part what they're looking for, and then it works. But in the National Assembly, it is not the tradition. So I really don't see what we're going to gain by having to change Monsieur Barnier for somebody else, unless maybe the new government is capable of maybe being a bit more open, which Monsieur Barnier has not been. And
well, it's not just about like ousting Barnier. It's also about the fact that he put forward a bill that can only be challenged by ousting him.
Has been the disappointment with him, really, that we thought, having negotiated the Brexit, that he was going to be able to negotiate with everybody, which was what he had said he was going to do. But in fact, he didn't. So beyond that disappointment, I kind of feel, if we vote the budget and then maybe we could have changed the government, that would have been right. But I don't think it's what's going to happen. So
I feel like you're being unfair on Barnier here. He's a conservative. There's no such thing as being unfair to him. He tried negotiating with everyone for the sake of a functioning budget. What concessions did he make to the left? I asked this earlier. I can't find any info on it. I can't find anyone in chat who has info on it.
So lots to criticize in the method of the current, let's call him the outgoing Prime Minister at this point, Léa Chamboncel. But Hélène Conway-Mouret saying the timing is wrong. Do you take her point?
I do understand the point, obviously, but the thing is that it's the first bill that the National Assembly has to vote for this government, basically. And I think the biggest mistake so far from the government of Barnier is not having dealt beforehand and before actually voting this text with all the coalition. What we usually do in politics when it comes to parliamentary regime, like we have in Germany, at some point, lots of people were making the parallel.
Are any of the people here going to make a real point?
Barnier was appointed with Germany, how the coalition work in northern countries, also Scandinavia. They have an agreement. They make a coalition agreement, and this can take weeks, if not months.
Did you see that, Richard Verly, how Léa seamlessly went from talking about Michel Barnier to talking about Emmanuel Macron? Is Macron the one who made the mistake here?
Well, Macron is definitely responsible for what is happening now. He is responsible because he has dissolved the National Assembly on the assumption that he will win the election. And he lost. And he did not acknowledge the fact that he lost. And not only that, he did not look first to the winner of this legislative election, which was the coalition of the left. I am not saying that it was compulsory for him to nominate a candidate from the left. I'm just saying in a normal parliamentary country, he would have first looked to that part of the political spectrum.
But there were overtures made to former Prime Minister Bernard Cazeneuve, who's from the Socialists.
Well, he received Bernard Cazeneuve, but he did not offer Bernard Cazeneuve the premiership. Or at least he did not say, Emmanuel Macron never said publicly, I offered Bernard Cazeneuve the premiership. So, and in addition to that, he said, the president, that for him, La France Insoumise, the Mélenchon party, was off limit, that he did not want them in a government. So he did not play it as you normally play in a parliamentary country. You go to look for the winner, you see what the winner can produce in terms of coalition. If they are unable to produce a satisfactory coalition, then you look for an alternative. That's exactly what happened in Spain. In Spain, the Conservative Party was the winner. The king first asked them to see if they could form a coalition. They were not able to do
exactly the kind of high IQ, sensible analysis I would expect from somebody wearing a denim shirt, which is to say a lot. Is this worsted wool? Is this like a casual business suit? Wearing a denim shirt with a suit jacket like this is a power move.
So he turned to Pedro Sanchez, who managed to do one with the Catalan, the Autonomist Party. So what I'm saying is Emmanuel Macron has made many mistakes, but the French voters are also very responsible because the result of the election is democratic. So what I did not like is that a lot of commentators were not happy about the fact that Macron dissolved the National Assembly, but this was a democratic move. He gave to the French voters the possibility to send a new National Assembly. And the fact of the matter today is that France is completely divided. And can you continue to exclude from government?
I think he has contrast flat pocket lining. Yeah, I'm pretty sure he does here. So that's a casual suit detail. I don't know if it's necessarily a perfect combo. You know what? Honestly, if you rock this with the right pair of pants, this could look pretty good.
Possibility to send a new National Assembly. And the fact of the matter today is that France is completely divided.
I can't see the buttons.
And can you continue to exclude from government, I'm just asking the question, the two parties that are Le Rassemblement National on the one hand, populist, national populist, and La France Insoumise, radical left on the other hand. Can you continue to exclude these two parties? Because they are the ones who are toppling Barnier government today. They are the ones who make this censorship motion.
The socialists are also voting against.
Socialists are also voting, but at the moment they are sorry, madam, under the tutelage of La France Insoumise, at least in the National Assembly, maybe not in the Senate. So if you want to recompose the political landscape in France, can you continue, I repeat, to avoid those two parties? I have my doubt.
Okay, so this guy's sensible. Who's up next?
Until next, that this time.
And a brand new constitution to allow majority is history.
That this time the president cannot dissolve the National Assembly. Yeah. This National Assembly is going to stay in place at least until next summer. So whoever the president appoints as prime minister after Michel Barnier, even if he renew Michel Barnier like General de Gaulle renewed Georges Pompidou, the next prime minister is going to have to deal
subheader telling me this guy's a student. I know.
With the current National Assembly.
All right, just before the vote, Barnier's predecessor as prime minister come leader of Macron's party in parliament wagged an accusatory finger at the collective opposition.
At a time when the global economic outlook is downgrading, where Donald Trump has just been re-elected president of the United States, France needs stability.
Then create it by acquiescing to the will of the people. You are the same as the people who let Donald Trump win. You are doing the same thing.
What's playing out here, what's playing out before us, is a situation where the socialists, with France unbowed, the National Rally, the communists, and the ecologists are going to pool their votes to plunge our country into the unknown.
So, like, you mean the entire country? Yeah, we would be stable if it wasn't for the right, the left, the ecologists, every single person except for us. If it wasn't for the majority of the electorate and the people in the National Assembly, we would be stable. Maybe look inward. This is what I mean. Liberals don't like, at least neoliberals, don't like democracy. They're contemptuous of it. They think of themselves as competent administrators, technocrats. They despise democracy because it means the stupid common folk get to meddle with their competent administration. Are they actually competent? In many cases, no, but this is how they feel. Like, he is literally, like, Macron's approval rating is in the toilet. He's literally saying, like, if only it wasn't for all these other people who believe these things, these more popular beliefs, we would be stable. Yeah, Macron is the one who called for the snap election, motherfucker. That's on him.
It's irresponsible.
Ça n'est pas responsable.
Léa Chamboncel, it's irresponsible?
I don't know. I don't think so. I don't think so, because it was the risk that Macron took by appointing, as we said earlier, a prime minister that in the end has only 49 members of the parliament that comes from the same party as him. We need to remind this. I mean, the political party of Michel Barnier is Les Républicains, and today there are only 49 members of them sitting at the parliament. So it was obvious that at some point what is going to happen, obviously, tonight.
All right, that's about all I can take of this, I think. I think we get it. So as France falls, just know that I was smug about it.
To discuss further, we're joined now by Rainbow Murray, politics lecturer at Queen. Chaos over responsibility, according to supporters of Barnier. So what happens next?
What happens next is uncertain. In the
Supporters of
short, well, the
Barnier.
immediate term, the current government has to continue in a caretaker capacity. But the pressure is now on Macron to appoint a new government quickly. Last time it took him 2 months. I don't think he can afford to take 2 months now. So he has to get a new government in place as soon as possible.
Hey.
There's also the problem of not having a budget. There's a deadline of the end of December to get a budget through. If that deadline isn't met, then France potentially faces a shutdown scenario, as we see in America, where no civil servants can be paid. We'll probably
Let's
see
go.
emergency legislation to carry over the previous year's budget until a new budget is in place. But that won't help to address inflation nor the growing deficit. So France is really in a position of turmoil right now.
And all sides blaming the other, as we've seen this evening. Who is ultimately responsible for the collapse of this government?
Oh, that depends who you ask, because everybody says it's someone else's fault. A lot of people are pointing the finger at Emmanuel Macron, and part of the point of this censure motion was to put pressure on Macron. If you listen to the left, they're not even particularly fussed about the specific circumstances that led to this. They were looking for any opportunity to bring the government down because they felt bitter that they weren't made the government in the first instance, having got the most votes after the recent election. The far right are trying to stir up trouble. They're trying to deflect attention away from their own legal wars. Marine Le Pen will do on the presidential election.
French internet.
So they're all playing their own particular games. The people who seem to be the most constructive out of all of this are the Socialist Party, the moderate left,
Yay.
who are saying that they would potentially be willing to build a more collaborative government in the wake of the fall of the current one, hoping that the left might now get some recognition and that they could work together.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like they, didn't win in the snap election. I mean, God forbid they get any voice in the prime ministership after winning the snap election and having the largest coalition by far in the National Assembly. Why should they have any say? Well, I'm glad she's being sensible about this, but that's enough of France. That's enough of France. Yeah, they're currently stripping copper wire from the internet cables under the ground, their infrastructure.